The chandeliers shimmered like frozen stars above a sea of gold and ivory. Soft music drifted through the air, mingling with the scent of roses and champagne. Elara Monroe stood at the center of it all, her gown a masterpiece of lace and silk, her dark hair gathered elegantly at her nape. She looked like a painting come to life, graceful, perfect, and heartbreakingly unaware that her fairy tale was seconds from shattering. The wedding had begun beautifully. Guests whispered about how lucky she was, how Nicholas Vale was one of the most charming men in the city. Her father's old friends raised their glasses with pride, and her mother dabbed tears of joy from her eyes. But then, as the orchestra played the final notes of the opening waltz, Nicholas excused himself with a smile, promising to return in a moment. That moment stretched into an hour, then another. By the time the clock struck 11, the laughter had turned uneasy. Conversations faded into awkward silence. A bridesmaid pretended to look for him outside while the best man avoided her gaze entirely. Elara kept smiling, her throat tightening with each passing minute. Her heart whispered that there had to be an explanation. Traffic, a family emergency, anything but abandonment. Yet deep inside, a sharp blade of fear began to twist. Midnight approached. The band stopped playing. Waiters quietly cleared the untouched wedding cake. Guests began to drift toward the exits, whispering apologies that stung worse than accusations. She could hear their pity like thunder behind her. "Poor girl," someone murmured, "left on her wedding night." Another voice, softer but crueler, added, "Maybe he found out something he didn't like." Elara stood frozen, staring at the empty doorway where Nicholas should have appeared. Her bouquet slipped from her hands, petals scattering across the marble floor like pieces of her heart. "She beat you," Arlie noticed her mother's trembling voice, or her friends urging her to rest. When the last car pulled away from the Harrington Grand Hotel, the grand ballroom was silent except for the distant hum of the city beyond the glass doors. In the privacy of her suite, she peeled off the veil that had felt like a crown only hours ago. Her reflection stared back from the mirror, perfect makeup, perfect hair, and eyes filled with disbelief. She wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, she laughed, a brittle sound that frightened even her. Then came the knock. Soft, almost hesitant. She crossed the room, her bare feet silent on the carpet. No one should have been there. When she opened the door, there was no one in sight, only an envelope on the floor, her name written in Nicholas's bold handwriting. Her pulse quickened as she tore it open. The note was short, cruel in its simplicity. "Forgive me. You deserve a better man than I could ever be." Her knees buckled. The paper slipped from her fingers, fluttering down beside the scattered rose petals. For a long time she sat motionless on the edge of the bed, staring at the note as if it might suddenly rewrite itself. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Down on the street, a man watched the light burning in her window. Rain darkened his suit and dripped from his hair, but he didn't move. Damian Cross had attended the wedding quietly, standing in the back, invisible to most but not to her heart. He had loved Elara for years, silently, faithfully, from the edges of her life. He had watched her fall for Nicholas Vale, watched her smile at another man, and told himself that her happiness was enough. But tonight, watching her window flicker with sorrow, something inside him broke. His hand tightened around the umbrella he hadn't opened. The storm raged harder, lightning tracing veins across the black sky. Yet he stayed rooted in place, as if the earth itself demanded he bear witness. Above, Elara finally let the tears fall. They came fast, unrestrained, hot against her cold skin. The rain outside echoed her grief, drumming softly against the glass. Somewhere below, Damian turned away, his expression carved with pain and quiet determination. He had promised himself he would never interfere in her life, but as the clock struck midnight, he knew that promise was over. The woman he loved was alone, broken, and unprotected in a world that had betrayed her. And Damian Cross, the man who had lived in silence, was about to step out of the shadows. Rain fell against the windows like the sound of distant applause, fading into silence. Elara sat on the floor of her suite, still in her wedding dress, her fingers clutching the torn note that had ended her future. The candles had burned low, the roses had wilted. Everything beautiful now looked cruel in its stillness. She wanted to scream, but her voice was gone. Somewhere between disbelief and pain, her heart had gone numb. A soft knock came again, this time not a trick of the wind, slow, firm, real. Her breath caught. For a second she thought it might be Nicholas, ashamed, returned to explain. She ran to the door, her hands trembling, and pulled it open. It wasn't Nicholas. A tall man stood in the dim hallway, rain dripping from his coat. Damien Cross. The name echoed in her memory. He had been her father's friend years ago, a man she'd seen in newspaper photos beside world leaders and billionaires. Tonight he looked nothing like that. Haunted eyes, tense jaw, his usual calm replaced by something fierce and worried. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, at the broken woman in a wedding gown surrounded by flowers that no longer meant anything. Then quietly he said, "I shouldn't have come, but I couldn't leave you like this." Elara stared at him. "How did you even know I was here?" she whispered. He hesitated before answering. "I was invited, but you never saw me. I left before the ceremony." He popped inside and closed the door behind him. His presence filled the room, not with comfort, but with a strange kind of safety. The air felt heavier, charged with tension. She wanted to hate him for seeing her like this, but she couldn't. Damien looked at the crumpled note on the table and his expression hardened. "He did this to you." Her throat tightened. He said nothing more, but his jaw clenched like a man fighting every urge to destroy someone. "You don't understand," she said weakly. "Nicholas must have had a reason. He wouldn't just leave me." Damien's voice lowered, deep and steady. "Maybe you don't know him as well as you think." His tone cut through her, half warning, half pity. She turned away, anger flashing through her exhaustion. "You shouldn't be here. You're pitying me. If I pitied you, I would have stayed away. I'm here because you're in danger." She froze. Danger. The word didn't fit her heartbreak. She looked at him sharply. "What are you talking about?" Damien moved closer, lowering his voice until it was almost a whisper. "Nicholas didn't run because he stopped loving you. He ran because someone made him. Someone wanted this wedding to collapse." Her heart stuttered. Who would want that? He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "You'll know soon enough. But until then, don't trust anyone who asks about him. Don't answer calls you don't recognize. And for tonight, don't stay here." Elara shook her head. "I'm not leaving my own suite because of a rumor." He exhaled slowly. "It's not a rumor. Someone already broke into Nicholas's office an hour before the ceremony. Files are missing. There's more to this than heartbreak, Elara." She stared at him in disbelief, searching his face for a lie but found none. Fear mixed with confusion, twisting inside her. "Why are you helping me?" He hesitated before saying, "Because your father asked me to protect you if anything ever happened." The words hit her like thunder. Her father had died years ago. How could Damien still carry his promise like a wound? Before she could speak, a loud noise echoed from the hallway. A shadow moved under the door. Both turned toward it. Damien's eyes sharpened. He stepped forward, placing himself between her and the sound. A knock. 3 times. Slow. Deliberate. Elara whispered, "Maybe it's Nicholas." Damien shook his head. "That's not him." He reached into his coat, revealing a small silver pistol, sleek, precise, nothing casual about it. For the first time, Elara realized she didn't know who Damien truly was. "Stay behind me," he murmured. The door handle turned, and in that single heartbeat, Elara Monroe's world shifted again, from grief into something darker, deeper, and far more dangerous than heartbreak could ever be. The door burst open, and wind swept through the suite, scattering papers and petals across the floor. A hotel guard stood there, wide-eyed and breathless, saying the cameras had gone out on the entire West Wing. Damien lowered his weapon slowly, but his shoulders stayed tense. The man apologized and left as quickly as he came, but the air did not relax. Elara felt the strange certainty that something unseen had shifted again, something much larger than her broken wedding. She turned to Damien, her voice shaking. "Tell me what you are not saying." He looked at her with that unreadable calm that made her feel both safe and trapped. "There are things better left quiet tonight. Go pack your things. You cannot stay here. You keep giving orders like you own me. Why should I go anywhere with you, because whoever did this wanted you isolated? I am the only one who knows what they took." His words carried a weight that made her pulse quicken. She tried to search his face, but it was shadowed by the low light. He took out his phone and called someone. His tone clipped. "Bring the car to the side entrance now." Elara wanted to protest, but when she looked down, she saw the note again. The words "forgive me now" looked like something written under pressure, not guilt. The handwriting trembled at the edges. Nicholas had been terrified of something. Maybe Damien was right. Maybe this was not about love at all. The ride from the hotel was silent. Rain turned to mist that blurred the city lights. Damien sat beside her, his face lit by the glow of the passing street lamps. Every few minutes he checked his phone, then slid it back into his coat with quiet tension. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but fear held her still. They stopped outside a towering glass building that shimmered in the night like a fortress of light. Cross Holdings. She had heard the name all her life, but never seen it up close. The guards at the gate nodded and let them in without question. Inside, everything smelled of polished marble and quiet power. Damien led her to an elevator that opened only after he pressed his thumb against a scanner. When the doors closed, she finally spoke. "What is really happening, Damien?" He looked at her reflection in the mirrored wall. "Your groom was part of a network laundering data through financial firms. He found something he should not have. When he tried to walk away, they made sure he disappeared." Elara's breath hitched. "That cannot be true. Nicholas built his company from nothing." Damien's eyes met hers. "Did he ever tell you where the startup money came from?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The elevator stopped at the top floor. The doors opened to reveal a vast office lined with glass overlooking the city. In the center stood a long black desk covered in files and screens showing security footage. Damien walked to one of them and played a video. It was from the night before the wedding. Nicholas in a parking garage, speaking to a man in a dark coat. The sound was faint, but the fear in Nicholas's voice was clear. He said, "I will do what you ask, just don't touch her." Elara's hand flew to her mouth. Damien paused the video. "He was protecting you, but they did not stop there. Someone inside your own company passed them access codes." She stepped back, shaking her head. "No, that cannot be. I checked the system myself. You missed one account." Damien handed her a folder. Inside were bank transfers, false invoices, names she recognized, some of her own employees. Betrayal unfolded in every line. Her voice broke. "Why would you have this, Damien?" "Because your father built the same system before he died, and I have been watching over it ever since." The silence that followed was heavy as thunder. He walked closer, his expression softening just enough to show exhaustion beneath the armor. "You think I came tonight out of pity. I came because I promised him I would protect you no matter the cost." Her mind reeled. She looked at him, at the man she barely knew yet somehow trusted more than anyone left in her world. For the first time since the wedding, the ache in her chest shifted from heartbreak to something sharper, hope mixed with fear. Outside, lightning flashed across the skyline. Damien's phone buzzed. He read the message, his jaw tightening. They know you are alive, he said quietly, and now they are coming for both of us. The night had turned colder by the time they reached the private airstrip outside the city. The rain had stopped, but the clouds hung low and heavy, swallowing the moon. Damien's car rolled to a stop beside a sleek black jet, its engines humming softly in the dark. Elara stepped out, still dazed by everything she had learned. She had been abandoned by her groom, betrayed by her employees, and now she was being whisked away by a man who had lived in the shadows of her life. "Where are you taking me?" she asked quietly. "To a place where they cannot find you," Damien said. His voice carried authority, but his eyes softened when they met hers. "It will only be for a few days until I know who is behind this. I cannot just disappear," she whispered. "I have a company to run, people to face, questions to answer." He turned toward her fully, his expression hardening again. "You have people trying to erase you from existence, Elara. You can rebuild your company later. You cannot rebuild your life if they succeed." The wind picked up, pushing her hair across her face. She could see that arguing with him was useless, yet something in his eyes made her want to trust him. She stepped onto the plane. The interior was dimly lit, warm with shades of gold and brown. Damien moved with quiet precision, checking his tablet and speaking to his pilot in hushed tones. When he finally sat across from her, the silence stretched between them until Elara broke it. "You said my father asked you to protect me. When did he ask you that?" Damien looked down at his hands, then back at her. "The night before his car crash. He came to see me at Cross Holdings. He said he had discovered a threat inside his own circle. He believed someone close to him was planning to use you as leverage." Her stomach tightened. "My father died in that crash." He nodded slowly. "I think it was no accident." Elara's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, but deep down, something about that night had always felt wrong. Her father's death had been too sudden, too clean, and followed by too many convenient silences. The plane lifted off into the storm. The city lights vanished beneath them, replaced by endless clouds. Damien sat still, watching her like a man memorizing a fragile secret. "You knew all this time," she said finally. "You watched me walk into a trap." "I tried to warn Nicholas, but he would not listen. He thought marrying you would make them stop." "Who are they, Damien? Tell me the truth." He hesitated before speaking. "Project Nexus. It was your father's design, an encrypted network meant to protect government data. Someone twisted it into a weapon, and for financial control. Nicholas found out and tried to pull you away before they could reach you." Her mind swirled with disbelief. "My father's work was used for that?" Damien's voice lowered. "Your father trusted the wrong people. Now those same people are hunting you because you are the last one who knows how to access the core files." Elara leaned back, her pulse pounding. "So all this time Nicholas was not a coward. He was protecting me." "Yes," Damien said quietly, "but he did not trust me enough to tell me everything. And now he is missing." The plane began its descent toward a coastline wrapped in fog. Below, cliffs rose above dark water, and at the edge stood a solitary mansion of stone and glass. "Where are we?" she asked. "My home," Damien said. "Cross Manor." The car waiting for them was black and unmarked. As they drove through the gates, Elara noticed the silence of the place. No servants, no guards in sight, only the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs. The mansion loomed like a secret itself, half light and half shadow. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and rain. Paintings lined the halls, their faces hidden in candlelight. Damien led her to a guest room overlooking the sea. "You will be safe here?" She looked at him, unsure whether to believe that. Safe felt like a word that no longer existed. Later, unable to sleep, she wandered the hall and heard faint music. A piano. The sound drew her to a large room at the end of the corridor. Damien sat alone in front of the keys, his fingers moving slowly through a haunting melody. He did not notice her at first, but when she stepped closer, she saw the sheet music titled with her name, Elara's Waltz. Her breath trembled. How long had he carried this secret? Damien turned then, his expression unreadable. "You should rest," he said softly, but his voice cracked at the edges, betraying something deeper. When she returned to her room, the storm outside grew fierce again. Thunder shook the windows. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement beyond the glass, a figure standing, near the cliffs below, watching the manor. Her heart stopped. Whoever it was, they had found her already. Elara pressed her hands against the cold window pane, the storm outside swallowing the cliffs in darkness. The shadow stood motionless below, watching the mansion as lightning flashed across the sea. For a heartbeat, she thought it might be Damien, but he was still at the piano. She could hear the faint sound of keys drifting up through the halls. When she looked again, the figure was gone. Only the crashing of the waves remained. Her heart pounded as she pulled the curtains closed. The air inside the room felt heavier now, filled with the uneasy silence of secrets. She wanted to wake Damien, but something in her gut told her not to. She needed answers, not comfort. She slipped on her coat and moved quietly through the dim corridors. The old floorboards creaked beneath her bare feet. The mansion at night felt like a labyrinth alive with whispers. Every turn seemed to lead her deeper into someone else's story, not her own. At the end of the hallway, she found a half-open door. The faint glow of candlelight spilled from inside. It was a study books stacked in uneven piles and papers scattered across a large oak desk. Her name appeared on one of the files, Elara Monroe Project Nexus Access Authorization. Her stomach turned. She stepped closer, flipping through the papers. They weren't about her company or Nicholas. They were about her family dates, bank transfers, surveillance photos, including one of her leaving her office 3 weeks before the wedding. Her hands trembled. Damien had been following her for months before tonight. A low voice came from behind her. "I told you not to wander at night." She spun around. Damien stood in the doorway, shadows cutting sharp lines across his face. His voice was calm, but his eyes were burning. "You were watching me," she said, barely able to breathe. "Why, Damien? What a titi." "Are you hiding?" He stepped forward slowly, closing the door behind him. "Because I had to know who was feeding them information, and I had to be sure it wasn't you." Her chest tightened. "You think I was part of this?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I did not want to believe it, but the files pointed everywhere, even to you. Someone in your office used your credentials to access Nexus servers. You were the only one with full clearance." Tears welled in her eyes. "I would never betray my father's work." "I know that now," Damien said quietly, "but I had to be certain before bringing you here." He walked closer, his voice softer now. "The truth is, I have been protecting you long before." Nicholas vanished. Your father's death left doors open and enemies stepped through them. She backed away, confused and angry. "Then what was the shadow outside my window?" His face hardened instantly. "Show me." They hurried down the hall and out to the terrace. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with salt and mist. Damien's eyes scanned the cliffs below. Then he saw footprints pressed into the wet earth leading toward the eastern wall where the security fence was cut. He swore under his breath. Someone was inside the grounds. He turned to her and said nothing, but his look said everything. She wasn't safe, even here. They followed the trail down to the cliffs until the wind howled too hard to hear their own footsteps. When they reached the edge, they found something half buried in the mud, a metal flash drive sealed in a plastic sleeve. Damien wiped it clean and stared at it with disbelief. It was marked with the Nexus insignia. He pocketed it quickly and took her hand. "We need to get back inside now. Whoever left this wanted us to find it." Back inside the manor, the generator flickered and the lights went out, plunging them into darkness. Damien grabbed a flashlight and drew her close. "Stay near me," he whispered. From somewhere deep in the house came the unmistakable sound of footsteps, deliberate, heavy, and unhurried. The intruder hadn't left at all. Elara's pulse raced. She clung to Damien's arm as they crept toward the grand hall. The beam of light caught movement at the top of the staircase, a silhouette standing still watching them. Damien raised his voice. "Who are you?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, it dropped something onto the floor that clattered against the marble and rolled to their feet. It was a wedding ring. Nicholas's ring. Elara gasped. The shadow vanished into the dark, leaving only the echo of footsteps fading into the storm, and the ring glinting like a cruel reminder that the man she thought was gone might not be dead after all. The morning came heavy with fog rolling across the cliffs like ghosts returning home. Elara sat by the window, still holding the wedding ring left by the intruder. Her reflection looked pale, hollowed out by sleepless fear. The ring was proof that Nicholas was alive, or a cruel trick meant to break her again. Damien entered the room quietly, coffee in one hand and the flash drive in the other. He looked like he had been awake all night. "It wasn't random," he said finally. "Whoever came here wanted you to see that ring. It's a message." She turned to him, her voice low. "Then tell me what it means." "Damien, are you saying Nicholas is part of this?" His jaw tightened. "I'm saying someone wants us to believe he is. The flash drive you found contains fragments of Nexus code, but it's incomplete. Someone is baiting us, drawing us deeper." Elara's heart sank deeper with every word. The walls of the mansion seemed to close in on her. She felt like a pawn trapped in someone else's game. Damien placed the drive on the table and crouched beside her. "I'll find the truth, but you need to stay where I can protect you." She met his eyes. "Why do I feel like you already know more than you're saying?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a second flash drive, one that was older, the metal worn smooth. "I found this the night your, father died. It holds the original Nexus code." Her breath caught. "You've had it all this time." He nodded. "Your father gave it to me the night before the crash. He said if anything happened to him, I was to destroy it. I couldn't. I thought maybe someday his daughter would need it." The room fell silent except for the waves outside. Elara stood walking toward the window. "So my father, my fiancé, and you were all keeping secrets from me." Damien stepped closer, not in defense but in quiet pain. "He didn't want to lie to you. He thought he could end it before it reached you." She turned sharply. "He failed. Damien. And now everyone around me is either missing dead or lying." Before he could reply, a sound cut through the air, the distant ring of the mansion's security alarm. Damien rushed to the control panel and froze. The cameras were looping again. Someone was inside the perimeter. He grabbed his weapon. "Stay here." She followed despite his warning, her heart pounding. They moved through the hallways, guided by the echo of footsteps on marble. When they reached the library, the doors were open and the curtains swayed in the wind. A figure was standing near the fireplace, back turned to them. Damien aimed his gun. "Don't move." The person turned slowly, and Elara's breath vanished. It was Nicholas, alive, pale and trembling, his eyes wild with exhaustion. He raised his hands and said softly, "Don't shoot. Please. I'm not your enemy." Elara stumbled forward, tears spilling down her face. "Nicholas, what did you do? Why did you leave me?" He shook his head. "It wasn't me. Elara, they used me. I had no choice. They said they would kill you. I faked everything. The note, the disappearance, the betrayal. I had to protect you." Damien kept his aim steady. "If you wanted to protect her, why break into my home?" "Because he's coming," Nicholas said urgently. "The man behind all of it. The one who killed her father. He knows she's here." The name hovered in the air, unspoken, but heavy as thunder. Damien lowered his gun slightly. "Who is he?" "Nicholas, Hess." Itated then whispered, "A man called Halden Cross." Elara froze. The name twisted through her mind. Damien's last name. Cross. She turned toward him, her voice trembling. "Is that your family?" "Damien?" His face went still. The air seemed to leave the room. "My father." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the shock in his eyes. Damien's voice cracked. "I buried that man 20 years ago." Nicholas stepped closer. "His death was staged. Halden. Cross is alive and he's running the network now. You're both in his way." The next second, a gunshot shattered the window glass. Nicholas fell back, blood blooming across his shirt. Damien pulled Elara down as more shots rang through the hall. "Snipers from the cliffs." Damien shouted, crawling to cover. He grabbed her hand. "We have to move now." They ran through the side corridors, glass shattering above them. The mansion's alarm screamed. The past and present had collided in a storm of bullets and betrayal. Elara could hear Damien breathing beside her. Raw, desperate, not as a billionaire, not as a protector, but as a man who had just learned the father he feared most was alive and hunting them both. The night swallowed the mansion as Damien dragged Elara through the smoke-filled corridors. His hand clamped around hers. The sound of gunfire echoed off the stone walls. Every step they took sent shards of glass crunching beneath their feet. Nicholas lay bleeding in the library behind them, but there was no time to turn back. The shooters were closing in. Damien's breath came hard and fast, his face streaked with sweat and fury. They burst into a hidden passage behind the old wine cellar. The narrow tunnel smelled of damp stone and salt air. It led out to the cliffs where the waves crashed like thunder. Damien pressed a button on the wall and a steel door sealed shut behind them, cutting off the sound of gunfire. The silence that followed was deafening. Elara could barely speak. "Where we going?" "Somewhere my father doesn't control." "Damien," said his voice raw and full of disbelief. "I don't understand how he's alive, but I'll find out." He pulled out a small satellite phone and called one of his security contacts, but the signal jammed. The interference was coming from the mansion itself. Whoever had attacked them had planned every detail. They emerged into the cold night. The sea wind hit her face sharp and wet. Below them the cliffs stretched endlessly dark and dangerous. Damien pointed toward the cove where a small boathouse stood barely visible through the mist. "That's our only way out." They climbed down the rocky slope as rain began to fall again. Elara's dress was torn and soaked, but she didn't care anymore. The only thing that mattered was survival. When they reached the boathouse, Damien kicked open the door. Inside was a sleek speedboat covered by a tarp. He tore it off and started the engine, but it sputtered once and died. He swore under his breath. Someone tampered with it. He turned to Elara, gripping her shoulders. "You need to listen to me. If I don't make it out of this, you run until you reach the lighthouse on the far side of the cove. There's a radio there. Don't say that," she snapped. "You're not dying on me too." He looked at her for a long moment, and something unspoken passed between them. Not just fear, but the raw truth that both had already lost too much. The engine roared to life, finally, and they sped across the black water. Rain lashed their faces. Damien steered through the waves, his jaw tight with determination. Halfway across the cove, a flare shot up from the cliffs, turning the sky red. Elara gasped as another boat appeared, cutting through the darkness behind them. Its lights were off, but she could see shadows, moving figures, armed and fast. Damien pushed the throttle harder. "Hold on," he said. The boat leapt over the waves, the engine screaming. Behind them, gunfire sparked across the water. Damien turned sharply, heading toward a narrow passage between two jagged rocks. Bullets hissed past them, one grazing his arm. He didn't flinch, just gritted his teeth and kept steering. They burst through the channel into open water. The cliffs loomed ahead like black teeth. Elara saw a faint glow on the horizon, the lighthouse Damien had mentioned, but before they could reach it, another explosion erupted from the shore. A fireball rose where the mansion had been. The entire cliffside burned red against the storm. Elara stared in horror. Damien's voice broke beside her. "They destroyed it, everything my father built." "No," she whispered. "Not everything. You're still here." He looked at her. then eyes dark with pain and something deeper. I thought I buried my father for good. He was supposed to die with his secrets. If he's alive, it means Nexus never ended. It means he's using it to control governments, banks, everything. We tried to shut down. The wind howled louder. The other boat was gaining on them. Damien reached into a hidden compartment and pulled out a black case. He pressed it into Elara's hands. If I don't make it, this goes to a man named Jensen Cole in London. He was my father's partner, the only one who turned against him. Tell him Project Nexus has been revived under Halden Cross. She shook her head, gripping his arm. You are not leaving me. Before he could answer, a bullet tore through the air, striking the side of the boat. The impact threw them both into the freezing water. Darkness swallowed her. The sea roared in her ears. She fought to surface, gasping as lightning flashed above. Through the chaos, she saw Damien struggling to pull her toward the rocks, but another wave crashed between them. She screamed his name, but the storm drowned her voice. The next flash of lightning showed only the waves and the broken remains of the boat. Elara clung to a piece of wreckage, her hands bleeding as the current dragged her toward the shore. In the distance, she saw the lighthouse flicker once, then go dark. She whispered his name, Aga, into the night, not knowing if he was alive or gone. And somewhere deep beneath the storm, in a hidden control room far from the coast, an old man watched the footage on a screen. Halden Cross smiled thinly and whispered, "Let the hunt begin." The storm had finally passed when Elara awoke on the rocky shore, her head pounding and her throat raw from salt water. Dawn was only a pale shimmer over the sea. The wreckage of the speedboat lay scattered along the rocks, but there was no sign of Damien, only the sound of waves breaking against the cliffs. She tried to stand, but pain shot through her leg. A deep gash bled just above her ankle. She tore a strip of fabric from her torn dress and tied it around the wound, fighting to stay conscious. Her eyes caught something shining in the sand. A chain tangled in seaweed, Damien's silver pendant, the same one he had worn the night of the wedding. She held it in her trembling hands, whispering his name, but the sea gave no answer. The lighthouse stood in the distance, a dark tower against the gray horizon. Elara began to limp toward it, every step a struggle. The path was steep and slick with moss. By the time she reached the door, she was shivering and half faint with exhaustion. The door was locked, but she found a broken window and pulled herself through. Inside smelled of rust and rain. The radio equipment sat silent, dust-covered and ancient. She turned every switch, every dial, but the machine was dead. She sank to the floor, shaking from cold and fear. Then she noticed a small leather book on the table with the initials DC burned into the cover. She opened it, expecting a logbook, but what she found stopped her breath. It was Damien's journal. His handwriting filled the pages with precise, dark strokes. He had written about her father, about Project Nexus, about the day he first met Elara. The last entry was dated only 3 days ago. It read, "The moment she knows the truth, she will hate me. But I would rather she hate me and live than love me and die." Her heart clenched. The words blurred through her teeth. "Ars," she whispered to the empty room. "You were planning this. Damien, you knew the attack was coming." Suddenly the radio crackled to life. A distorted male voice filled the air like static, broken by wind. "Is anyone there?" Elara froze, gripping the microphone. "This is Elara Monroe. Who is this?" The voice hesitated, then said quietly, "You don't know me, but I work with Jensen Cole. He told me to find you. We intercepted a signal from Cross Holdings. We think Damien is alive, but captured." Her pulse surged. "Where is he, tell me? We don't have an exact location yet, but the last coordinates trace to an offshore facility owned by Halden Cross in the Baltic Sea. We're sending extraction, but you have to move. They know you survived and they're tracking your signal right now." Before she could answer, the window shattered. A drone hovered outside, its red sensors flashing. She dropped to the floor as a sharp click echoed from its body. Damien's pendant vibrated in her hand, a small compartment opening inside, revealing a chip smaller than a fingernail. the Nexus Master Key. The drone fired, but she rolled aside as the blast tore through the wall. She grabbed the chip and the journal and ran down the spiral stairs into the storm. The lighthouse behind her exploded into flame, pieces of glass raining into the sea. She stumbled into the forest, following a narrow trail that led inland. Her lungs burned. Her leg throbbed, but she didn't stop. Not until she saw headlights through the trees. A black Jeep slid to a halt and a man jumped out. Dark hair, sharp eyes. He wore a tactical vest with the initials J.C. Jensen. Cole. He said only one sentence before pulling her into the car. You just became the most hunted woman in the world. As they sped down the coastal road, Jensen tossed her a satellite phone and a coat. We'll get Damien out, but you need to understand something. Project Nexus isn't just about data control. It's a weapon, system that can predict and manipulate human behavior at scale. Whoever holds that chip in your hand can control governments and destroy them. Elara stared at the chip as realization dawned. My father built this to protect people. Jensen nodded, and his partner twisted it into power. Halden. Cross wants it back. He will burn entire cities to find it. They reached a private airfield where a small jet waited on the tarmac. Jensen motioned her aboard, but as she climbed the steps, a voice behind her cut through the roar of the engines, cold and unmistakable. Going somewhere, my dear. She turned slowly, rain dripping from her hair. Halden Cross stood at the edge of the runway, flanked by armed men. His face was weathered, but his eyes burned with the same cold fire she had seen once in Damien's. A cruel smile touched his lips. You have something that belongs to me. Elara and I am tired of waiting. Her hand tightened around the pendant. She stepped back toward the plane, her voice steady even through the terror. No, I have something that will end you. Halden's smile faded. His men raised their weapons, but the jet's engines roared louder, drowning out his words. Jensen grabbed her arm, pulling her inside. The plane lifted into the storm, bullets slicing through the rain below. Elara looked out the window at the shrinking figures on the runway, her heart racing. She didn't know if Damien was alive or what waited ahead, but one thing was certain. The war her father started was far from over, and she was now at the center of it. The jet tore through the storm clouds like a wounded bird, lightning flashing outside the windows. Elara sat strapped into her seat, clutching the pendant that hid the Nexus key. Jensen worked at the cockpit, his jaw tense and his eyes flicking between instruments. He hadn't said a word since takeoff, only the rhythmic clicking of switches filled the air. Finally, he spoke without turning around. We have 1 hour before we reach the safe zone in Iceland. If Halden's men tracked the plane, we might not make it that far. Elara looked out, into the darkness, trying to steady her breath. Below the clouds lay only endless black water. She couldn't stop thinking of Damien, his voice, his promise, his silence. She refused to believe he was dead. The image of him fighting to pull her from the storm still haunted her. She turned toward Jensen. How do you know he's alive? Jensen glanced back briefly. Because Halden doesn't kill valuable pieces. He breaks them first. Damien has information he needs, and I know where he's keeping him. Tell me where she demanded. A facility beneath the old oil rigs off the Baltic coast, Jensen said. It's disguised as a shipping station, but it's a prison and a lab. Nexus is being tested there on live subjects. Elara's stomach turned. What kind of testing? Jensen hesitated. Measuring obedience. How far human behavior can be bent before it breaks. Damien was trying to shut it down from the inside before you even knew it existed. Before she could speak, the jet jolted violently, alarms blaring across the cabin. Jensen swore and slammed a button. A missile lock. Get down! The explosion ripped through the tail of the jet, sending fire streaking across the wing. The world spun. Elara's scream vanished under the roar of chaos. Jensen fought the controls, yelling for her to brace. The ocean rose up fast, then everything went black. When she opened her eyes, the night was cold and silent. She was lying in a life raft, waves rocking her under a bleeding sunrise. The wreckage of the jet smoked in the distance, but there was no sign of Jensen. only the pendant still around her neck and the waterproof bag strapped beside her. She dragged herself upright and found a beacon light flickering weakly on the horizon, an oil rig just like he had described. Pain burned in her muscles as she rowed toward it, every stroke against the icy current feeling heavier. When she finally reached the structure, the ladder was slick with oil and salt. She limped anyway until she reached a metal platform where the wind howled so fiercely it nearly knocked her back. The rig looked abandoned, rusted, and hollow, but faint light glowed through one of the lower decks. She crept inside. The corridors were lined with machinery humming with low electric rhythm. The sound of voices echoed down a narrow hall. She followed it, pressing against the wall until she reached a window overlooking a vast chamber. Below her, rows of glass cells pulsed with dim light. Each one held a person sitting motionless, eyes glazed as if caught in a trance. Their movements synced like puppets following an invisible rhythm. Elara's heart raced. Nexus was no longer just code. It was alive. A deep voice filled the room. Halden's voice instructing the technicians. Increase the synchronization feed to subject 11. That one resists too strongly. Elara looked toward the far corner and froze. Behind the glass sat Damien, restrained by metal bands around his wrists, his eyes half open, his face bruised but alive. He was whispering something, repeating her name over and over like it kept him conscious. Tears blurred her vision. She pressed her hand to the glass, whispering back, "I'm here. Damien, hold on." Suddenly, an alarm blared. Red lights flared across the corridor. A female voice shouted through the speakers, "Security breach on level 4. Elara spun around, but a figure blocked her path, a guard in a black mask. She swung the emergency wrench she had grabbed from the wall, striking him across the helmet. He fell hard, and she ran down the stairs, following the signs to the lower level. Every hallway felt endless, every door locked until one opened into a control room filled with screens. She found the main terminal and inserted the Nexus chip. The monitors flickered and scrolled with code access granted. She typed commands instinctively, recalling the systems her father once showed her. The cells began to power down one by one, including Damien's. Footsteps thundered behind her as Halden's voice boomed over the intercom. "You have no idea what you—" "Re-unleashing girl, you'll kill them all!" Elara's fingers flew faster. The screen flashed, override sequence engaged. She didn't stop, even as bullets shattered the glass around her. The last line of code executed, and the cell doors opened. Damien stumbled out, weak but determined, grabbing a guard's weapon and firing toward the balcony. He shouted her name. She turned in time to see him limping toward her, but before he could reach her, Halden appeared above, aiming his gun at her back. The shot rang out. Damien threw himself between them, the bullet tearing into his shoulder. He fell against her, blood soaking her hands. She screamed and fired back, hitting the control panel. The whole facility erupted with sparks and alarms. As the systems collapsed, the screens showed one final message flashing in green: Nexus core transferring. Elara stared at the words in horror. Someone else was taking control, and the last location blinking on the map was London. She clutched Damien's face as he gasped for breath. His eyes met hers, and he whispered weakly, "Finish it, Elara. Destroy Nexus before it consumes everyone." The metal floor trembled beneath them, explosions ripping through the rig. Flames roared up the walls as she dragged him toward the exit, but the bridge ahead was already collapsing. The sea waited below, a black, endless depth, and above it all, Halden's voice echoed through the fire. "You can't destroy destiny. Elara, you are part of it." She looked back once at the man who had ruined her life, then leapt with Damien into the storm below just as the rig exploded behind them. The water swallowed them whole, a freezing black weight dragging Elara downward. She fought to surface, kicking against the current until her lungs burned. When she broke through, she gasped for air, lightning slicing across the sky. The oil rig behind them was a burning skeleton collapsing into the sea. She turned in panic, searching for Dam. Ian. His body floated a few feet away, motionless. She reached him, pulling him close, his face pale but his heartbeat faint, still fighting. A rescue vessel appeared through the smoke lights, cutting through the chaos. Jensen stood on deck, waving them toward him. Elara screamed for help, and moments later, strong hands pulled them both aboard. The medics rushed to Damien, his breathing shallow but steady. Jensen wrapped a blanket around her, shaking his head. "You should not be alive." Elara's voice was hoarse. "We destroyed the system, it's over." Jensen's eyes darkened. "Not yet." The core transferred before the explosion. The signal was traced to London. The last person with access there is Halden's heir, someone using the name Adrian Cross. The words froze in her throat. Adrian Cross, Damien's half-brother, a ghost she had never met. Damien stirred weakly, whispering his name as if the pain alone could conjure his memory. Jensen said he controls the remaining databanks under Cross Industries. He plans to release the full version of Nexus to the world disguised as an AI system. They arrived at a private facility in Iceland where Damien underwent emergency surgery. Elara refused to leave his side. For 3 days, she sat beside him while storms raged outside. On the 4th night, he opened his eyes and whispered her name. She told him about London, about Adrian, about the data transfer. He tried to rise, but pain forced him back down. His voice was rough. "We have to end it at the source. There's only one way in through the old cross tower where my father started everything. The servers are buried under the building. If Adrian activates the system, the world will turn into a prison, and no one will even realize they're trapped." Elara nodded, already determined. "We finish it together." 2 days later, they landed in London under false names. The city gleamed cold and perfect beneath gray skies. Cross Tower rose above it like a monument to pride. Elara wore a simple black coat, her hair tied back, her eyes hard with resolve. Damien walked beside her slower but strong again, his arm bandaged, but his spirit sharper than ever. Inside the building, the atmosphere was eerily calm. Workers moved like machines, their faces blank as screens. Every monitor displayed the same message: the future is here. Project Echelon launching. Tonight. She recognized the system's interface immediately. It was Nexus, rebuilt, renamed, and polished for global release. They took the elevator to the top floor where the main control room glowed with blue light. At the center stood Adrian Cross, tall, precise, every inch. A reflection of the father who had created this empire. His voice was smooth as glass. "I wondered how long before you crawled back. Damien. You always had a habit of trying to fix what should never be fixed." Damien's tone was steady. "You're repeating his mistakes, Adrian. You think you can control the world, but you'll only destroy it." Adrian smiled. "You don't understand, brother. The world wants to be controlled. People crave certainty. This system gives them peace. No lies, no pain, no choice." Elara stepped forward, her voice sharp. "That isn't peace. That's slavery." Adrian turned his gaze to her. "Ah, the architect's daughter. The perfect irony. Your father built the mind, and my father gave it purpose. You're the last key in the chain. Elara Monroe, the core code recognizes your genetic signature. It will only activate through you." She felt the pendant grow warm against her chest, the Nexus key pulsing as if alive. Adrian extended his hand. "Give it to me and you'll see a new age rise." She shook her head. "I'd rather see it burn." Adrian's calm broke. His men drew weapons, but before they could fire, Damien lunged, hitting the emergency blackout. The room plunged into darkness, sirens blaring. Elara ran to the terminal, inserting the key and typing fast, overriding every lock command. She could feel the system fighting back, code flashing like lightning across the screen. Damien shouted behind, "He!" covering her with gunfire. Adrian's voice echoed through the chaos. "You can't stop it. It's already online. You destroy this and the entire grid will collapse. You'll erase everything, billions of systems." Elara's fingers hesitated. She looked at Damien. His eyes met hers, steady and unafraid. "Do it," he said quietly. "End it once and for all." She pressed the final command. The screen went white. A shockwave rippled through the tower lights, flickering out one by one. Every device in the building powered down. The hum of Nexus died, replaced by silence. Adrian stumbled back, disbelief on his face. You destroyed perfection. Elara's voice trembled, but held strong. No, I destroyed control. Humanity doesn't need perfection. It needs freedom. Adrian reached for a weapon, but Damien struck first, knocking him unconscious before the alarms signaled the building's collapse. They ran down the stairs as explosions tore through the upper floors. Heat and debris followed them until they burst through the ground floor into the cold London rain. Outside, sirens wailed, police and fire trucks converging. Elara turned to see Cross Tower burning the night sky, glowing red. Damien pulled her close, rain mixing with ash on their faces. "It's over," he whispered. She leaned against him, exhausted. The city lights flickered back to life, one by one, not controlled, not perfect, but real. Days later, news networks across the world reported a mysterious global blackout, followed by the fall of Cross Industries. The system known as Echelon was gone, and with it the last remnant of Nexus humanity was free again. Elara stood on a balcony overlooking the Thames. Damien joined her, his arm around her shoulders. For the first time in years, she felt the quiet of peace. He smiled faintly. "You saved the world, you know." She looked at him, eyes soft and certain. "No, Damien, we saved each other." In the distance, the sun broke through the clouds, touching the river with gold. The world was imperfect again, and beautiful because of it. And as they stood together beneath the light, Elara knew that some stories don't end with victory. They end with survival, with love, and with the courage to begin again.